Welcome to the RMS Train the Trainer virtual session. All right, my name is Gerald McCoy. I'll be your trainer for today. If you guys can hear me, go ahead and hit a thumbs up in the chat just to make sure that you guys are getting my audio. All right, cool. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, as mentioned, I'll be your instructor for the Train the Trainer today. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are going to start off with our participants being muted during the presentation. The RMS staff will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and the RMS staff will go ahead and jump on those questions. At the end of each section, you will also be given an opportunity to ask questions at that point in time. You will be unmuted, and you'll choose to unmute yourself, and then you can just jump in and ask your question audibly. In about 5 business days, the recording will be posted on our site. So you guys can go ahead and check our sites that we have available. Many of you guys already know them. First off is the RMS.USA's website. So when you go to that site, you can navigate over to check the slides. You can download the slides from the RMS.USA.Army.mil site as well. And you'll also be able to head over to our YouTube channel, the RMS Support Center YouTube channel, and you'll be able to get the download of that particular video as well. The video as a whole will be available within 5 business days, as mentioned. If my presentation speed is too fast, let me know. Please let me know in the chat, and I'll try to slow it down a little bit. If you need something repeated, let us know in the chat as well during the question and answer period also. If you have any questions which are outside of the scope of this training, we will note them and answer them once the core content of the training has been reached. So this training does not include any guidance on business processes, policies, or regulations that govern your particular district's way of doing things. We will try to keep things general so that you can utilize RMS to best fit your district's needs. To ensure that we minimize any audio issues, I will check my mic before starting each section. So if you just give me a thumbs up in the chat when I do that mic check, that'll be great. That'll just keep us moving, making sure that you guys can hear me as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump on to the next slide about this course. Who is this training for? So those of you who have been assigned at a district level for managing the official duties in some sphere, in some admin capacity, if you've been assigned the permissions and roles of a district admin, and as a district admin, the RMS general user population will look to you for guidance in all facets regarding RMS, from general rules to report creation. And essentially, what we're trying to convey here for our particular goal of this training is to equip you with the skills you need to assist in troubleshooting and resolving some of those repeated issues, and bringing you up to speed on some of the old and new topics within RMS that will be discussed within this particular course. There are no prerequisites for this course. However, attendees are expected to be very familiar with navigating RMS, entering data, and knowledge of governing regulations. We will go over some screen aspects of entering some data, but mainly it's just to call out certain gotchas. Attendees should expect to gain a deeper understanding of how RMS works, why RMS works the way it does, and gain some insight on how to teach their fellow RMS users as well. RMS is a large program and has many modules. We've identified 13 of these modules where most of the users tend to have questions or issues may arise. Those that we're going to discuss during this particular training include setting up prime contractors and subcontractors in the district office, SAM change to replace DUNS with UEI, adding staff and defining staff roles, assigning PII access for RMS users, PCF documents, document package exports, how to filter selection views on certain modules, how to set up contracts, the SDEF section, RMS-P2 Interface, schedules, activity schedule, milestone schedule, placement schedule, feature schedule, creating custom reports and queries, and then the closeout tab as well. Prime contractors work directly with the government. They manage all subcontractors and are responsible for ensuring that the work is completed as defined in the contract. In general terms, the contractor is responsible for the planning, leading, executing, supervising, and inspecting of a building construction project. Basically, the responsibility extends from the beginning to the end of the project, regardless of its scope. However, in order for our staff members, as far as RMS staff goes, to start to enter a contractor, we must first set up and enter these prime contractors into the system. One of the first steps that they must go through is they have to first register with SAM to add themselves to the system. Once they've been added to the system in SAM, then we can go ahead and start the entry process. The main entry process for the prime contractor starts off at the district office level. Once the prime contractor is entered into the system's database at the district office level, the prime contractor can be added to the individual contracts as a whole. So at that point, the user can log into the RMS system, government mode, select the desired contract, and then click on the prime contractor module in order to go to that section. Once they're in that section, that module exists in both RMS 3.0 government mode and RMS 3.0 contractor mode, but just realize that the data in the second section and down are mostly entered by the contractor. The primary contractor's name and information should be added to the prime contractor's list in the district office, as previously mentioned, and then it can be added to the contract. The responsibility code for the prime contractor is always going to be prime. So as you note on the third row down, responsibility code as prime, PRIM. And when we get to this screen as well, we can see two major areas that usually come up for contention. One of them is the prevent contractor mode access. That option is to prevent contractors from accessing contractor mode for this contract. And it's used when there's a dispute, termination, or other reason to prevent access to the contract by the contractor. The government will also enter the prime contractor's NAICS code. That's their North American Industry Classification System as well. And they can grab that from the search, which can be found on the NAICS site. So if they head on over to NAICS.com, they can go through and they can look up, either search by the NAICS code if they have it, or they can do a company lookup, and the company lookup will then show that particular user's NAICS code if they're trying to find their NAICS code. All right. Any staff assigned to the prime contractor will have access to the contracts that the prime contractor is assigned to. So if they are administrators or given the user roles, they'll have access to that. It is usually the job of the USA's representative to assign only the first contractor staff and make them an administrator. From that point forward, the contractor will add additional staff members to the prime contractor staff and assign their user roles. It's easy for the contractors to make every staff an administrator, but this is dangerous and we don't recommend it because those particular people that are made administrators can add and remove additional staff and modify all the contracts that the prime contractor has access to. So to avoid this, the government should recommend and should advise their contractors to set up user roles to limit access and allow for greater control of data. If the prime contractor they're looking for does not show in the list of prime contractors, then they may also need to request that a government member, staff member, add them to the list. And usually a district staff member would have to add them to that district staff member list. One thing to keep in mind when navigating RMS is that there is no save button, so this often confuses users. The back button functions as the save button. So if they click on just the back button, their data will be automatically saved. That being said, we'll go ahead and click on the district office button. And the district office button will take us to that prime contractor view where then we can go and click on add, and we can add a prime contractor overall to our prime contractors list. The prime contractor that we add here, we can add their name in general, and then that name, once we're done, in this case test company, we'll click on OK, and then it will generate that particular prime contractor and add them to the overall list. You'll notice there's the UEI number. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then there's the NAICS code, as well as the full name, and then the cage and DUNS number. The DUNS number is read-only currently, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as to why that is read-only. All right, once the prime contractor has been added, and we have edited the prime contractor and added them to the prime contractor list section, we can then start to add our subcontractors to the list as well. The prime contractor is responsible for the control and coordination of subcontractors. So the subcontractors modules where the prime contractor can maintain their subs for the job site by tracking their performance and compliance on the job to meet contract requirements. One thing to keep in mind is that the subcontractors modules are linked to various modules in RMS-3, such as daily reports and pay activities. So this means that some of these corresponding modules will not allow you to delete data until the appropriate subcontractor is removed. Now, once you get to the subcontractor screen, you'll notice that clicking the add button will prompt the user for a 4-digit contractor code. This 4-digit alphanumeric code is a unique code that identifies each subcontractor. This 4-digit code is found on the SDEF if they're using SDEF, or some other scheduling package that the contractor may be using. If the contractor is not using a scheduling package, then they can just create an arbitrary code to map to their contractors. Just keep in mind that the code should follow them for the life of the contract. So it'll follow that subcontractor for the life of the contract. They'll enter that 4-digit code after they click on add, and then once they click on OK, they'll be presented with their subcontractor screen. On their subcontractor screen, there's various entry fields. I'll just go over them really briefly. The contractor short name, you can enter an abbreviated name for the subcontractor to be used in reports with limited space. So the field length for this is only 20 characters, so just keep that in mind. The character full name, they can enter the subcontractor's full name here, and this field is limited to 60 characters. There's also the address, and they can enter the subcontractor's mailing address. The trade is a lookup, so you can click on the box and select the subcontractor's trade from the displayed lookup. Now, if the applicable trade cannot be found in the table can be updated in the district library contractor trades module. So let me go ahead and bring that up right now. All right, let me bring up RMS. And there we go. All right, so essentially district library, and then we will look for contractor trades. So usually if the contractor trades does not show up here in this list, it's because it's not entered in the drop-down list section in the library. So just have to make sure to add it there. That's usually one of the gotchas for that area. After the library is updated, you'll be able to select the trade from the updated list. Now, one other entry that we're looking for as well is our POCs. So we'll be able to enter our POC information. We can also enter the subcontractor's amount as well. And then we can go through and enter and select the appropriate check boxes if insurance is required and other such entries. Now, same note, if we're deleting subcontractors, it's as simple as just deleting the subcontractor. But as mentioned, keep in mind that RMS-3 does not allow deletion of subcontractors if there are records associated with the subcontractor. One other thing to keep in mind is if the payroll's ending day of the week is changed mid-contract, then duplicate payrolls could be generated. It is recommended that once the contract starts, this field does not change. So a quick reminder, payroll ending date must be set. All right, and we do have a demo on this. When you download the slide, you can go through and run through the demo. We do have several videos that'll run through these elements as well. All right, we've reached the end of this section. Do we have any questions relating to this section? Over. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next section. All right, and we are at the GSA-SAM change to replace DUNS with UEI, so the General Services Administration, basically for the system for award management, change to replace the DUNS with the unique entity identifier. So that was actually done on April 4th, 2022. GSA transitioned away from the DUNS number and began using the unique entity identifier. The UEI for purposes of registering in SAM.gov. The UEI is owned by the federal government and is generated in SAM.gov. Some government contractors will still require a company to have a DUNS number, which you may already have. If not, you can apply for a free DUNS number. The DUNS number is globally recognized and utilized for contract checks, compliance checks, business credit, and funding and other business use cases. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of those. So first off, if they need more information, they can go through and go to SAM.gov, and SAM.gov will walk them through everything regarding the DUNS to unique identifier, them being the contractor. So if your staff members are having issues talking through these particular transitions, you can go through and have your contractor visit this site, sam.gov, and they'll go through and walk them through all of the necessary information as well. If they're also in need of DUNS number, they can go to get a DUNS. That is dnb.com, DUNS-number/get-a-duns.html, and they can get a DUNS. Just realize that anything after April, they will not be able to enter the DUNS number into RMS, as the field is now only read-only. And if they need further help, they can also visit fsd.gov, and they can open up a ticket so they can help on UEI transition, open up a ticket, and essentially they'll be contacted, and then they can go through the walkthrough steps with the appropriate person that's going to be helping them through that. So all of those things are there for the transition to be as easy as possible. So the last part of the information that we cover here is all of those screens that I pulled up. So let me go to the next section. So if the contractor organization is currently registered in sam.gov with either an active or inactive registration, they have already been assigned a UEI. So if they're already in SAM, they're already going to have a UEI. The UEI is viewable on the contractor's entities registration record in sam.gov. If you have any questions about UEIs or the recent UEI transition that are not answered in the facts or in the other available resources at fsd.com or fsd.gov, excuse me, you may contact the fsd.gov by calling or choosing create an incident on that page that I listed previously. All right, in order to get to that particular transitional page, we'll log into RMS. We'll go ahead and select our particular district, and then we'll go to the district office. Once we hit our district office, then we will select our prime contractor. And once the prime contractor is selected, we'll then click on the edit button for the contractor, select the contractor that we want to edit, and then we'll click on the edit button for that particular contractor. One other question that comes up is, where do I find my UEI? As mentioned before, they could find it at sam.gov, but there's also one other fact sheet that they can go to. Let me pull that up real quick. All right, so this is the fact sheet that they will go to when they follow that particular link. This will go through and explain all of the necessities regarding the UEI transition, everything that the contractor needs to be able to do in order to transition seamlessly. So all the information will be contained in this 3-page document as well. All right, and essentially that 3-page document can be found within the download of the slides. So if you go to rms.usa.army.mil, you'll see the slides available for download. You can download those slides, and then you can get all the links that I'm showing right now. But once you have the UEI and you edit that particular contractor, now you'll be at the contractor's edit screen, and the UEI number field requires manual input for all the contractors. Once this is accomplished, the staff member can then verify in RMS the contract view, and then the prime contractor can then be linked to that UEI. If a DUNS was recorded prior to April 2022, then it will display in the DUNS field as a read-only. So it's going to be a read-only display as noted right here on the screen. While the prime contractor UEI has been updated, the staff member will need to update each contract in RMS individually. So there is currently no blanket process or batch job to accomplish this task right now. So essentially what that will look like is that you'll log into the contract, you'll go to the administration tab, you'll go to the prime contractor tab, click on the prime contractor menu option, and then you'll select the UEI and contractor information button that's on the screen once that prime contractor has been selected. A lookup will appear, and then you'll be able to choose that contractor from the list, and then that contractor will then be added and copied down to that contract. And then the UEI field will be updated. So overall, it's a pretty simple process for doing it. The major gotcha here is trying to find your actual UEI, which should be easy to do. However, if they are having problems, we do have all of those resources that they can utilize to actually get their UEI. Once they have their UEI, it should be a pretty straightforward process to enter the data and then copy the data down to each one of the contracts. All right, and we'll reach the end of that particular section. I'm going to open the floor up for any other questions. Over. All right, copy that. Thank you. The next section on the list is contract personnel, and this is basically talking about adding staff and defining staff user roles. A breakdown of the contract personnel is as follows. So typically, the district admin adds, edits, and deletes contract user roles in RMS. The district admins have contract user role read-write permission for all contracts in the district. Office admins have read-write permission for all contracts attached to their office and have no access for contracts at other offices. District admin typically adds, edits, removes project delivery team members to and from each contract and assigns them a user role. Any user with assigned user roles office permission can assign for the office is given in, and any user can be given district-wide permission with assigned user roles, district, or contract user roles for their particular permission. Please check with your district administrator or your particular district if you have any questions regarding these. Now, you guys are the district administrator, so in this case, it will be up to you to make sure that you double check your particular role process and how you assign your roles for your particular users. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the contract role information and the contract personnel. We do have a demo regarding this. The YouTube link is on this slide. So when you download the slide and click on that, you can actually see the demo there. For the contract personnel, we're going to log into RMS, choose our desired contract, and then we'll click on Administration tab and then select the Contract Personnel module. Once that has been selected, we'll be presented with the Contract Personnel view. And inside this Contract Personnel view, there are two major sections. So the topmost section is going to be the Project Delivery Team Members section, and we can add government staff members to contracts and assign user roles to whom will be executing the contract. And then the Contract Personnel user roles on the bottom section, we can view user roles from users set up in RMS-3 government mode here as well. A quick walkthrough on this is that we can go through and we can click on the add button to add our particular user, use the search function to locate the staff member to add, and then click OK. Once that's all finished, we can then change the staff member's position or title to reflect their role. For instance, a PE could have a role set up with QA, but that's pretty straightforward. If we want to go through and save it, you just click on the back button as mentioned before to save it as well. Now, one of the usual gotchas on this screen is who do I usually add to the PDT? And for me, I can't really tell you who to add to the PDT. The delivery teams typically include those professionals involved in the programming, planning, design, and construction of the project. The size and composition of the project team will vary depending on the extent of the capital design, the construction budget, and the various facets of the project. Of course, available staff in your overall district also plays into the selection process as well. So this will usually be dictated by the project owner, so you may have to seek additional insight from the project owner. But once you have that insight, then you can go through and start adding those project delivery team members from there as well. And it should be a pretty quick process in order to do that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up RMS real quickly here. All right, and let's go out. So one of the quick things we want to touch on first is under the district office, there is the prime contractors here, which we talked about earlier. This is where we'll go through to actually select and check our contractors, our prime contractors that will be added to the overall system. I'm not going to make any changes. I'm going to just cancel out of there. But that's where everything starts. You have to add them there first. Once we actually add them there, then we can go into our contract, and then we can go to prime contractor, and then we can go through and select our particular contractor who we want to add. We can also click on copy UEI, and we can choose to select the UEI from a particular contractor, the contractor, same contractor, hopefully, that you're utilizing on that contract. And then if we want to prevent access, that's this button up here to prevent the access. All right, and then the part we want to take a look at now is the contract personnel. And the contract personnel, as I mentioned, is separated into two different screens here, two major parts. The first part up here is where we actually add the project delivery team members. And we can obviously choose to add the project delivery team member from there, select a team member. Once that team member is added, we can then go in and we can choose to edit that particular team member's project title here as well. And as I said, the main gotcha is figuring out who to add to the project delivery team members list. But usually if we talk to the specialist or the project owner, they should give you the insight on who to add to that particular list. All right, and we reached the end of that section. If there's any questions, we'll open the floor right now.
There's one question that I don't see answered.
Yeah, I see one. How to add the same person to ACO and RE. Let's see. Are you talking about a double header? Are you talking about on the project delivery team? Ah, I see what you're saying. That's a good question. I think the way that the original design was set up was that you could only add that particular team member once, because there is a check to see if that person was already added to the list. Yeah, so you'd add it as the highest level of the permissions tree. Yep, that's correct. Okay, so Bosley answered that one. All right, cool. Thanks, Bosley. All right, I think since we answered that question, we'll go ahead and move on to the next section of PII Access for RMS users. Oh, but you want to show both through the title? Yeah, I don't think currently the way the architecture works is that you can't add two of the same user twice. So they would have to have two separate accounts. Or we'd have to pitch that to the RMS users group to see if that would be usable. Yeah, that would be more of an RMS users group. So we'd have to basically pitch that up to the PMO and to the users group to see if that will be adopted for the program change. But we can definitely take that into account, and we can push it up to them and see. So yeah, copy that. Thank you. All right. All right, perfect. Okay, I just made a note just really quickly just to come back to that, and then we'll talk to upper management regarding that. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so next section is PII Access for RMS users. And PII, or personally identifiable information, needs to be protected. And we've received guidance from headquarters that RMS must abide by PII processes. And as such, essentially, appropriate PII training must be maintained to be granted RMS 3 PII access to these particular modules. If the government user has a CAC, a Common Access Card, PII training is maintained through the yearly UPass required training. If the government user does not have a CAC, the user will need to contact their PII district administrator with their UPass expiration date in RMS staff to access contractor payrolls, labor interviews, contract file, labor folder, and payrolls, and PII documents and exported contract files as well. So the modules we're talking about, just so you can see them, are the contract file listed there, the contract payrolls, and the labor interviews listed on the screen. Access to these modules has been limited to users who have completed the UPass PII training. So users that log into RMS using a CAC will have access to these modules. However, RMS 3 government mode and RMS 3 government mode controlled unclassified information users who log in with a username and password must submit PII training certification proof to the PII admin for the user's district to obtain access to this particular module. So if you're logging in with your CAC and your overall training is completed, you should gain access. If you're logging in with a username password, then that verification is done manually. So to get access to PII and RMS, please contact the PII district admin for the district. There's a list of all district PII admins on SharePoint, which is only accessible from a government computer. So a link to this list can also be provided from the RMS Support Center. So you just have to open up a ticket and entitle it List for PII District Admins to obtain a link for that particular list. And then once that is opened up, we'll go ahead and respond to you with the link for that, and then you can grab that list. The role of the PII administrator is to make sure that yearly PII training is properly maintained. The only way to become a PII administrator is to get approval from the RMS PMO. The administrator will validate the documentation requested from the user and enter the expiration date into RMS in the PII training expiration date box. Now, a quick note here, the PII expiration dates will only show for government users where the enable non-CAC login has been enabled. So you can see that pictured, the view of the user staff records showing the PII expiration date if the user is set for non-CAC login. So you can enter the date by either typing in the date or picking it using the calendar icon to the right of the date box. The message received when your PII training is expired or has not been taken in order for the user to continue to have access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls, the user will need to retake the PII training and provide it to the user's district admin before the expiration date. If the user does not do this, access to those modules will be revoked. So keep that in mind. One of the gotchas there is that if a user yesterday was able to access those modules, and then today they come back and say, hey, I can't access those modules, one of the possible issues is that their PII renewals have not been done, and then their date has not been updated. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So non-CAC users who need access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls will get notifications for PII training expiration dates when the expiration date is 30 days, 15 days, 7 days, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 day prior to the expiration date, and again once the date has passed. In order for the user to continue to have access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls, the user will need to retake the PII training and provide it to the user's district PII admin before the expiration date. All right, so real quick, I'm going to pull open RMS. All right, if we go to RMS staff, and just go ahead and search for my staff member. All right, so right down here, this will show if you're a PII admin. So if you don't know if you're a PII admin, you can go look in your staff, and then you can check right here if you're a PII admin. The other box right here is date PII training expires is set up right here as well. So those two access points can be found on this particular screen. All right, and we've reached the end of that section. I'll open the floor up for any questions. Over. All right, copy that. Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed to the next section, which is going to be PCF Documents or paperless contract files. Just quick mic check. You guys can still hear me, right? I get a thumbs up in the chat. All right, perfect. Jacob, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Bonita, thank you. All right, perfect. What is PCF? PCF, paperless contract files. Billy, thank you. Is a secure web-based application. PCF is designed and certified to store official contract files as required per FAR subpart 4.8 in an electronic centralized depository. As a web-based records management application, it is not approved for classified information. So very important, make sure that no classified information gets uploaded within RMS. Failure to adhere to this policy is grounds for dismissal in accordance with U.S. Code Title 18-1001. So no classified information should be uploaded into RMS and sent over to PCF. The RMS and PCF data flow is as follows. RMS has a one-way data flow and allows documents that are generated in RMS to be sent to PCF. PCF is the required repository for all official contract documents. Contract file documents are automatically placed in the appropriate PCF folder, usually referred to as cabinets, and then any additional documents can be manually added as well. If you want to check the actual destination file in PCF or destination cabinet in PCF to see that your document has made it over, you'll need to know what your cabinet is located in PCF, where your cabinet is located and what the title of your cabinet is called. Contract file is where all the official documents are stored. So you must manually add folders and subfolders after you go through and edit those particular items. The government signed documents will automatically upload to the correct contract file folder or the cabinet on the PCF side. The contractor signed documents for some modules will have to be manually loaded to the contract file folder, which will then be transmitted over to their respective cabinets. In general, when we're taking a look at the screen, the data flow is simply starting off groupings by the folder and the subfolder. So when you first come into the screen, you'll see the groupings by the folder and the subfolder of all the contract files that are within the system and all the documents in RMS, which will be sent to PCF. For ease of use, as mentioned, it's automatically grouped initially. And a quick note is that you can also group by the status or document title. You can drag over any additional groupings that you need up to the top grouping section. To expand one of the group folders, just click on the lookup above the folder name. So there's a little arrow, you can expand or collapse. Quick note here is documents deleted from the contract file will also be deleted from the originating document package and vice versa. Documents that have been sent to PCF or ready to send to PCF cannot be edited or deleted. So one of the things that comes up a lot is that the user will say, hey, I sent the document over to PCF, but it was a mistake. Can I go ahead and delete it in RMS and it'll delete it? Our integration is only one way. So essentially, we can't go through and delete that particular document from PCF. We can only send it once the document is sent. That's it. If there was an error, you'll have to create a new document, or the staff member will need to create a new document and then send that new document over to PCF. To manually add an official document to a contract file folder, you'll click on the add on the contract file view, select the section and add the document by either generating the document or selecting the document from your local file. When you're looking at the screen, this is what you'll see, and this is what you'll be greeted with on that particular screen. When you're manually editing the document, you'll go through and you'll select that particular document. You have the 3 options that you can choose from. You can edit the document, you can remove the document, and you can view the document. A quick note as well, if official document is not entered into contract file folder correctly, there's no way to remove it from the database. We can't stress that enough. the corrected document will need to be added to PCF overall for it to be resent. So that's one of the gotchas for this screen. If the official document is not entered incorrectly, there's no way to remove it from the database over in PCF. A corrected document will need to be added. So just want to make sure to stress that as much as we can there. When we're looking at the overall section, the documents associated with the daily reports in PCF, daily report QC, PCF status screens, as we note on this particular screen. When we're looking at the PCF documents, the overall editing of the PCF document folder or module is as follows. You can start in the middle, so you'll be starting at section 1. You'll notice there is a completed at the top. Sometimes completed will be at the bottom, but it was decided to add completed to the top for this particular section. So you'll start in the middle, attached documents. You'll go through and you'll choose those particular documents. Then you'll go down to the brief summary. You'll add your summary. Once everything has been selected and done, you'll jump back up to the top, number 3, and then you'll go through and complete your document. And then if anything is ready and it's completed, ready to be sent to PCF, you'll click send to PCF button, and then that will make it ready to send to PCF at that point. We can then examine the PCF documents view to track the overall status of the PCF documents. It seems that once a year, we have an outage that is at a higher level than we at the RMS Center can control, and we must then submit and push tickets into various teams at CEIT to troubleshoot the transmission of the data and data flow to PCF. So when that happens and after the issue is mitigated, it takes some time for the PCF data to get caught up in its transmission. What we'll usually try to do is we'll send out notifications to the admins and to the general staff to apprise you of the issues so that you can be informed and so that you can also inform your users as well. All right, and that is the end of that section. Double check, I see question. Okay, cool. All right, Bosley answered that question. Cool, thanks, Bos. All right, copy that. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and jump to the next section. At this time, we want to touch on the import-export menu and its submodules. So this area includes the operations needed to bring external data into RMS-3 and export selected document packages. So this area was designed to make exporting documents from various document packages in RMS easier. So essentially, the first module we want to address is the P2 imports module, or the P2 USA's PMBP, or the Project Management Business Processes AIS. So those are the names that it goes by. This is the interface that links to P2, of which all USA's contracts are linked. This process is automated by a computer batch job, so no action is needed from the user. This module can also be used to view information about a specific contract in P2 as well. When you click on the menu option, it'll take you to the screen and present you with the following screen that lets you know that this process is fully automated. So there's nothing you really need to do for the import P2. We'll get to some other P2 related tasks, but that's not until a little bit later in the training. The next area we want to take a look at is the import from another contract module, and that was designed to allow the import of contract data from one selected source contract to another. So in starting a new contract, a staff member may find that one contract may be similar to another, and in an effort to reduce data entry time, or they can choose to copy elements from the similar contract over to their destination contract. The staff person can start by clicking on the blue copy from contract button to select their source contract, and then essentially follow the overall progression. So they'll select the contract that they want to copy data from, select the data that they want to copy by clicking on the appropriate checkboxes in the Select Data to Copy area. They'll click on the Copy Selected Data button at the top of the screen. And then a warning will pop up, which will basically appear, and it's basically a confirmation asking you yes to proceed or no to cancel, just to make sure that your action is indeed purposeful so that we're not making any type of mistakes or issues here. The document package export module provides the ability to export documents in mass from various document packages throughout RMS. And overall, document packages are used throughout RMS to facilitate the inclusion of supporting documents. Document packages are typically created after completion of the data entry of a record. The system will create a new package and add a PDF copy of the form for the contractor to sign and submit to the government. Sometimes, if a legal issue arises or some other issue rears its ugly head, and it basically requires us to print out all the documents because they're needed for some type of issue, that's what this module is there for as well. So in essence, we can go into the document packages export. An overview of this module can be summarized in 3 steps. We can click on the boxes to indicate the download choices. We can then click on the documents. We can select the download folder, and then once we're done, everything will be saved to our local drive. The gotcha on this screen is that some boxes will affect other boxes. So if you jump onto the screen and you basically select a box, they will control some of the other boxes. Let me go ahead and pull up RMS to illustrate this. Going to import export. Oh, not that contract. We'll go to our other one. There it goes. All right, so essentially these are our first 3. So clicking on import P2 will bring up that screen as mentioned before. Clicking on import from another contract will allow us to bring up this screen. We can select our source contract, that's our copy from contract, and then essentially it'll be copied to our destination contract that we're currently in. And then we can check which one of these items we want to copy as mentioned. And then our document package export, if we choose to get documents, it's going to tell us, it's going to give us a notification that basically said you have to select something. So if we choose that, it's going to say select something. So in this case, we can go through and start to include items we want to select. But as you notice, if we click on a particular checkbox, it'll essentially provide an action response on one of the other checkboxes as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind as we're going through and taking a look at some of these elements. All right, there we go. All right, next on the import-export journey, we're going to take a look at the import QA deficiencies. And sometimes out in the field, someone may be entering deficiencies into RMS, provided with the Excel template to track deficiencies that have been found. Any item that has not been performed or completed in accordance with the contract is considered a deficiency. So this module is used to import large amounts of data, thereby saving the user time and avoiding the need for manual entry. You can download the import template from the same screen. Make sure that the contract number, date, location, and deficiency description is added to the import template. You can read the template instructions. Essentially, the main gotcha here is altering the template. The pitfall to this module is that the user may have inadvertently edited the template, and essentially all you have to do to fix it is just download a new uncorrupted template and then transfer the data to that import, and it should work. Once you're all done with that, select the QA rep, click import deficiency items from the Excel button. Confirmation message will be displayed. You click OK, and then you get your data imported into the system. Next is the export mods list module, which adds the ability to export a list of all the modifications for the contract. Essentially, it's the same thing. You'll go to that particular screen. This particular screen is usually an issue when locating the file. So you'll go ahead and do an export to file. Just have to make sure that you save it to a location that you're going to remember or to your desktop. You can also export it to the clipboard as well, and then you can paste it into a document that you currently have open. Next, we have import real property, and the import real property screen allows us to have an input template available used to create a batch input file to feed into RMS. It's basically an Excel format, which allows flexibility in getting the real property data into the RMS systems, both from a user familiarity standpoint with Excel and how Excel is managed, and the editing capability available in Excel, the cut and paste and insert rows, etc. So RMS, you can basically import, export that real property from that screen, and it has the option of selecting that particular template as well. So when you get to the screen, you can download the template, and the same pitfall applies to this template. If a user goes in and they essentially changes something on the template, then the whole template may be corrupted. So you'll have to download the template again, download an uncorrupted template. Once that template has been downloaded, you can transfer the data to that template and then perform your import. We also have an instruction sheet on that, so you can go through, read the instructions, and to make sure that you're abiding by the required data entry fields as well. Next on the list is import submittals, and the import submittals functions almost exactly the same. When you go to the screen, it also has a download template. You can download the template from there and then give it to the user who's going out into the field so they can record the information. Once the template is ready, select where the template will be uploaded to. And then with this one, you'll notice that you can select import to a register. So if you have multiple registers, it's very important that you choose the correct register. That coupled with the fact that there's an import mode, which is overwrite or merge. If you select overwrite, it will completely wipe out all of the data within your register that you're importing to. So if you're importing a register, like let's say you have two registers, O1 and O2, and you meant to import it to O2, but you imported it to O1 and you overwrote, that data is pretty much lost, and then we'll have to go through data recovery. We'll have to go through and call the DBAs to see if we can pull your data back. If something like that happens, please call us as fast and as soon as possible so that our DBAs can basically take a look at that particular data. We do have certain elements that are available to us within the first 5 to 10 hours of data loss. So you can go through and give us a basically create a trouble ticket, and we can go ahead and take a look. But prevention is worth a pound of cure. So just make sure that we double check, triple check where we're importing to and what import mode we are currently selecting. Once again, on the screen, we have our import submittals module as well with the overall instructions on how to fill it out. That is the Excel template, and then the submittal instructions on how to fill it out also accompanies it as well. And then we have our SpecsIntact section where we can import. This is an automated software program that RMS is allowed to use that helps in preparing standardized facility construction specifications. The SpecsIntact file can be used to import information into RMS submittal register, and the information can then be bulk loaded into the RMS submittal register. Now, if a user is trying to utilize the SpecsIntact module, they can go through and essentially go to the SpecsIntact website, and the SpecsIntact website has the SpecsIntact program that they can download and then they can utilize in order to create their specifications as well. Once they've created those items, they can then export them into the SpecsIntact file format, which is the Army 4288 file format. Once the file is generated, you can then go through and start the process of importing the SpecsIntact file. And the SpecsIntact file import is a very simple process. You'll click on the add button, you'll follow the instructions, double click the edit or edit file, select the file, and then you can click delete as well if you're trying to delete. On that particular screen, you can go through and start to remove any duplicates, duplicative information that's on the SpecsIntact file, or the user, if they unintentionally replaced an already existing submittal register, you can re-import one of your old submittal registers, and hopefully you still have it saved, and that will bring that item back in there if it was saved with SpecsIntact. As noted above, you also have the two elements that are listed: merge into our register 01 or replace register 01. So it's very important that we look at those items and double check them so that we are not replacing when we should be merging, or merging when we're replacing. On that section view, we can go through and check our sections. The submittal sections are displayed there. We also can check our reviewers to see if any reviewers were duplicative information. And then we can also check our SpecsIntact file, the raw file, to see what it looks like, if we need to make any corrections within SpecsIntact itself to generate a new file. All right, the last module that we're going to take a look at is the standard data exchange format module, and that is a set of rules defined by the USAs of what information should be contained in a specific rows or columns to meet the formatting guidelines set by the USAs for uploading information that must be followed in order to be processed. So the network analysis system, or standard data exchange format, or SDEF format, is used to basically bring in that information from other scheduling packages or scheduling software package. The SDEF file is a text file that contains information exported from Primavera, and right now Primavera is essentially the gold standard. There were some other systems that were used, Aldergraph, there is Microsoft Project as well, but as far as I know, they have a third-party tool. So we do have some other items available where you can download the ER1-1-11 document. So if they're trying to get their items working with SDEF, they can use that document to get their items working, but that will be a manual entry on their side. Right now, Primavera is pretty much the only one that gets it working out of the box. So that's the one that we currently go through and recommend. They're the only ones that gave us items for testing. So we've tested theirs, and theirs works pretty well. So that is specifically formatted so that the file may be read by RMS. The SDEF file itself is divided into 9 parts, each part being called a record. The 9 parts included are listed as volume, project, calendar, holiday, activity, precedence, unit cost, progress, and the file end, which signifies the end of the file for that particular structure. When we're taking a look at the NAS SDEF, we'll click on NAS SDEF, and then we will proceed to the add section. So the SDEF selection view lists all of the SDEF files previously uploaded to RMS. Each row displays a few columns of data for quick reference, the data date as indicated on the SDEF itself, and then the schedule type is manually indicated when uploading the file. The date imported is created automatically when the file is originally imported, and the date invoice imported when the financial data from the SDEF was imported into an invoice. SDEF file is the file name and approval status. Importing the data date or importing the data, select the add and edit and delete buttons in the upper left-hand corner of the selection view. So essentially you can select either one: add, edit, delete, add to add a new SDEF file, edit to edit an SDEF file, and delete to delete an SDEF file. Clicking on the add button initiates the SDEF data file import wizard. So from the add view, click the select file button to initiate that Windows open dialog, and then you'll locate your SDEF file. After locating the file, you'll click open, and then you'll click the next in the bottom right hand corner of the add view. After clicking next, the information about the file is requested, and then the file type is either preliminary, initial, impact schedule, rebaselined schedule, monthly update, recovery schedule, or completion date. So you'll go through and select your most appropriate option. The data date is filled automatically with the information extracted from the file. The file version is a subjective numbering system as determined by the contract as the project ID. And then after the file information is completed, you can go ahead and click Finish in the bottom right-hand corner of the view. Once the Finish button is clicked, RMS will open the Edit view. And a quick note, for existing SDEF files, this view is also accessible by selecting an SDEF file on the selection view and clicking Edit, or simply double-clicking on the file itself. When you're looking at the overall SDEF edit view, you'll notice the top section, which will show you all of your header information. And then you'll notice the bottom section, which will show you your grid information, such as activities, calendars, and SDEF schedule. When looking at the SDEF edit view, you can click on each one of the tabs, activities, calendars, SDEF, and it'll show you each one of those particular sections. The final section, which is the SDEF file, shows you the raw data file itself. And a quick note for this is that for NAS activity schedule, it is critical that the actual start and actual finish date in NAS schedule are the same dates added to the actual activity start and finish dates entered into QC daily reports. If the dates aren't the same, RMS won't import the dates, and that's if a particular module is checked. And let me go ahead and bring that up right now. So this note is referring to the section in administration, and then contract setup, and then submittals and schedules. So it's referring to this section right down here under schedule. If this is checked, requires the contractor to use actual start and finish dates from QC reports on the NAS, then it will go through and validate that those actually match. So if they don't match, you will receive a notification on that screen. All right, and let me bring up real quick the import for SDEF requires two parts. Requires the government part and the contractor part. And we actually do have a video on it, so I'm just going to walk you through it. Let me go ahead and click on the items real quick. Okay. All right. So essentially, we'll go into our contract, and once we select our contract, we'll proceed upon entry. We'll then go over to the import-export section of the contract and then choose the NAS SDEF. And as you can see, we have a list of our previously imported SDEF files as they were listed. We can see the approval status, which is showing not accepted. We can choose to add a new one, and then we can select a file. In this case, I'm going to select the SDEF text file. And then as we can see the data file information, we can choose. Usually when we import a new one, we'll choose preliminary. From there, we'll get the summary information, which is shown on this particular screen. And the contractor from this side, as you can see at the upper right-hand corner, the colors are kind of a little orangish. You'll see that this is the contractors section that the contractor's currently importing. The contractors can go through and double check all of his items and make sure that all of his data is correct before he does his submission over to the government side. So once we're going through, we're just going through and making our double checks. We're going to check the calendar, make sure all of our calendar information is correct from the contractor perspective, making sure all of our work times are correct. And once we validate each one of these particular items, then we'll go through and select our item for approval. At this point, if you found any type of issues, then you can go through and generate a new one. At this point, we'll request acceptance to import this schedule from the government, and then that will be sent over to the government. The government will log in, and then they will see their item at the bottom, which they'll be greeted with their acceptance requested on the bottom there. Yep, acceptance requested. And essentially they can go ahead and double click on that particular contract SDEF file, and they will be presented with the information that they can review as well. So they can preview the data, import into contracts. So once they click on that, they'll be able to see all the proposed changes that will be given to them from within that particular export if they choose to approve it. So they'll get all the list of the information, the CLINs, and all the activity lists of that type. If the review is successful and they're okay with it, they can click accept this schedule for import. They'll go ahead and choose that. And once the schedule has been accepted for import, their side is done. And then the contractor now comes in and they can see on their side that the elements have been accepted and ready for import. And now they can go through and preview and give it one final double check. And now they have the button to import SDEF data into the contract. They'll go ahead and do that, and then they'll get the notification that import into the contract is completed. Click on OK, and all the data has been completed into and imported into the system. All right. And that's pretty much the overall import process for that NAS SDEF section as well. All right, and we've reached the end of that section. Do we have any questions? Go ahead and open the floor for any questions. Over. All right, copy that. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is setting up a new contract. So setting up a new contract should generally be pretty simple in the sense that you click on the add button, but there are some pitfalls or some gotchas in setting up a new contract. First things first, we want to make sure that the user is in the correct view. So we want to make sure that they are displaying contracts and not displaying projects. If in the displaying projects, you won't have the add or edit button or the archive button. So as we note there, if we're displaying the contracts, if we're in display projects, we won't have that add, edit, display button. So let me just pull that up real quick just to illustrate that. All right, so in RMS, and we're referring to these two radio buttons down here. So right now we're in display contracts and we have our add, edit, and archive buttons. And if we click on display projects, we only have our edit button. And so that's one of the gotchas where users might come in, they forgot that they were on display projects and they're saying, hey, I can't add or edit a contract. And so just make sure that their display contracts is selected and then their add or edit is displaying up here. One of the other things is that they might not have proper permissions. So that's one thing to take a look at as well. All right. But to start the process, once those issues have been verified, we'll just go ahead and click on the add button, and then we can enter the title for a new contract, and then we can change the office if needed to the office that will be administering the contract. Once the information is entered, you can select OK, and then after clicking OK, the contract menu screen will be displayed. Once the contract menu screen is displayed, we can go through and click on administration if we're not already on it, and then we can click on contract description. And once we're on contract description, we have several elements that we'll take a look at. So under contract description, we have the following fields which need to be entered: the fiscal year, the contract short title, the contract number, the delivery order number, the contract long title as well. But there's a quick note: you got to make sure that the contract number and delivery order number must match exactly what is on CFM. So let me go ahead and do a quick breakdown element here. All right. So usually when we're looking at a contract number, which is usually referred to as a DODAC, the Department of Defense Activity Address Code. We're looking at our segmented number up here. We have our enterprise identifier, which is located there. We have our year. We have our procurement instrument type code. We have our serialized identifier, and then we have our delivery order number as well. Delivery order number section is what we really want to focus on, because this can be a number, it can be NA without the slash, and it can be N/A. We want to make sure that our number matches exactly what we're getting from CFMS. So if the number doesn't match exactly what we're getting from CFMS, we might have problems later on with our downloads when we're trying to download our finances. Go ahead and bring that back down. So it's very important that the contract number, delivery order number must match exactly with CFMS. Okay, while we're still on the contract description screen, we can go down a little bit, and then we can enter the following fields: the contract description, primary fund type, contracting method, contract location, and then the customer information as well. There's optional fields, which are the wage determination number and wage determination date. Once the information is entered on this field, in these sections, we can go ahead and click on the back arrow, which will then save our data. We can then proceed to our next screen, which will be contract setup. And inside of contract setup, that's where we will go through and start to double check our information for CFMS and make sure that that information is linked and correctly selected in the dropdown. So if we're working with a different district outside, we'll make sure to select that district for our CFMS, or if we're working within the main office, it'll usually default to your main office that you're currently in, that you selected that contract or created that contract under. The default entries may be changed based on the office policy, is the quick note that we want to enter here. So if you have different office policies applied, the default entries may go through an overall change. When we're entering the screen, though, we want to make sure that use CFMS for downloading finances and uploading. If not going to use CFMS, you must uncheck that, but that's the default. So usually on creating a new contract, we will leave that checked. CFMS database name will make sure database name matches the CFMS database name where you'll be pulling financial data from, or where the specialist or where the person doing the setup, the government person doing the setup, will be pulling from. Will this contract be linked to P2? If yes, we'll keep this box checked and make sure that we validate that. Use P2 data prior to award. So if RMS can use P2 data for pre-award milestones, then we'll go ahead and keep that checked. Use only one phase. The default is unchecked. So if you check this box, RMS will treat a multi-phase P2 project as one phase. We just recommend that you leave it unchecked unless you already know that you need to have it checked to treat everything as one phase. You can allow government to enter contractor data. That's not recommended. So we go through and we recommend that you leave that so that the contractor can enter their particular data. Excuse me. Track insurance, track payrolls, track labor, requires a DD 1354. These fields are used just for custom reporting. So don't alter except if the category codes need to be changed. So if you're changing a CAT codes to match the using service, so for example, Army, Navy, etc., if your CAT code does not show up in the drop-down menu, you need to check the Enable FY22 lookups for DD 1354 box, which is available for all the contracts. So, and that is the checkbox that's right underneath the category codes for Army. Send docs to PCF. There is an option to not upload to PCF, used in very rare cases. So consult the district POC. In this case, most of the times that will be left checked. So usually you can just leave it checked without issue. RMS 238 QCS has sunset. These options will be removed in the future releases of RMS. So basically the RMS 238 has been sunset. So these options will be basically removed later. We're currently leaving them in there now for some backwards compatibility stuff. But as soon as those things done, then we'll go through and start the process of removing those entries as well. Now, one of the things that we want to determine is how to track funding and track funding at the funding account level. So the default funding method is track funding at funding account level, pre-planned obligations for payment on all CLINs. So if we're going to choose track funding at funding account level, that's the normal default setup for RMS. And essentially this option gives you the most control, but requires the most data entry of all the options. So you can maintain each funding account. The second option is track funding at project level. You can compute obligation amounts for payment based on available funds. So RMS will treat separate funding as one and will prorate payments based on the amounts of funds available. The third option is track funding at project level and manually enter obligation amounts for payments. So users are required to enter obligation amounts manually for each option or for each payment option. So there's a quick note that we want to bring forth here is that we recommend that you do not use project level funding unless it's required. So once funding has been set and payments processed, do not alter payment methodology. It could result in data loss. So we want to avoid or mitigate data loss when possible. If you opt to change funding methods, you will see a warning screen, and that warning screen will require a digital signature, which will notate who changed it. And so if for some reason we have to go back and do some some double checks to see where things went awry, we will have the person logged who did the actual change. So if we do have to go back and change those elements, just keep, be aware that you will be signed, your name will be signed when that gets changed, digitally signed. Next, we select the Payment Modifications tab. We can enter the Administrative Contracting Officer modifications information and the Contracting Officer modifications information. We can check the progress payments to allow additional earnings not included in activity earnings. Checkbox to allow for the contractor to bill for stored materials and performance and payment bonds. So this only needs to be checked if the contractor is not going to be using a pay activity for these items. So we can also check the Include All Activities on Prompt Payment Document button to see all activities for the contract on every invoice, regardless of what is billed. So a quick note on this is obligations for payment will be populated once the CFM's finances have been downloaded. So keep that in mind. So there's also no need to populate it with the same person. So when we get to number of shifts on the bottom, so when we go through and we talk about the payment modifications section, the tab is completed. We can select quality assurance tab and enter the following field information: the project engineer on-site COR, number of QA shifts, chief QA rep shift 1, and then time extensions due to unusually severe weather. Usually when we get to QA, chief QA rep shift 1, and then alternate QA rep shift 1, there's no need to populate that with the same person. So I think that's the only gotcha on this screen. Sometimes we'll go in and see people populating it with two of the same people. There's no need. If the person is assigned to shift 1, you don't have to assign them as an alternate. So you can just leave them assigned as the primary and not the alternate. Another quick note is that the QA report type only needs to be changed if it is different from the default. So that's the quick note that we wanted to list right there as well. So if you download the slides, you'll be able to get all that information from there. Next, we'll go to the Submittals Schedule tab, and we'll enter the review periods for the appropriate type of submittal types and the default number of copies that the contractor is required to submit. When we are entering the default government reviewer, this will populate the submittal register automatically with this individual's name, and will default the transmittals to their office address, and then we'll check that address. Transmittal 4025 package, that's the 2, is set in the office address that should appear on the ENG 4025. So it'll just double check that address to 4025 packages 2 option. Now, when we're entering all the information, as we notice above, we have the government review period, and we're entering it for government only, for information only, designer of record approval, government of conformance, review design, designer of record approval, and government conformance review of design, and then the designer of record approval and government approval. You'll notice that there's no sustainable notebook there because there is no required review period for sustainable notebook. So that's one of the questions that might come up. Some users may go in and say, why did my sustainable notebook not get a default? It's basically because sustainable notebook does not have a default. That's the way it works for both review period and for the default number of copies as well. There's sustainable notebook does not get either of those. So one of the gotchas here, as we mentioned before, is that there could be delays in syncing the payments and coordinating the submittals to the connecting activities if the imported NAS does not match, and the checkbox, which is right there, requires the contractor to use actual start and finish dates from the QA reports on the NAS. If that is checked, it will go through and double check the imported SDEF file to make sure that it matches with the QA schedule, and if those items do not match, then you'll get a notification. So that's one of the gotchas there. Just want to make sure to bring that up once again. So the general steps to setting up a contract is that we'll add the contract description, we'll complete the information from the contract setup menu, we'll go to the administration and funding tab, then we'll go to the payment modifications tab, we'll edit the quality assurance tab, we'll then proceed to submittals and schedules tab, do our entries and data requirements there, and then we'll proceed to the dredging tab if that is required. Once all that is done, then we can go through and start to manage the overall contract. If we want to download finances, we can do that as well. All right, and that brings us to the end of that section. Are there any questions regarding that section? Over. All right, no questions noted. We'll go ahead and proceed to the next section, which is our RMS P2 interface as well. Is P2 interface not working? It was currently working. I don't know if we are experiencing an outage. If James is on the call, he can confirm if we're currently having an outage. All right, I'll wait later, but I'll just keep. Oh,
yeah.
There.
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute. Yeah, so a portion of the P2 is down. That produces the web CMI web pages. That is a process that keeps failing because we're trying to connect up with the P2 database, and we keep getting timeouts. They've been aware of the issue and have been working on it. So some of the standard P2 downloads should be working though, because we keep retrying on that, and eventually it will succeed.
Copy that. Thanks, James. All right. Excellent. All right, so that brings us to our RMS P2 interface section. Good transition here. And essentially, after logging into RMS and selecting the desired contract, we can select the administration tab and then the P2 projects module. P2 access from the administration module is flowed as such. So the administration module is where all administrative functions are located. We can go through and do the contract setup for new contract actions. We can set up the prime contractor and contract administration. We can set up the contract description and the contract number, set up our weather days, submittal register, select manual or NAS schedule. And then we get to our P2 projects, which can be linked to RMS contracts within this section. It is recommended that the project administrators link RMS contracts to P2 numbers and set up contract obligation amount for each funding account under contract funding tab, and set up a award contract amount under project funding tab, and then set up the primary fund type under the contract description module. And then from there, we can proceed to assign the PDTs, and then we can do the RFIs, and then the contract file folder information, and then finally the contract status should be kept updated throughout the construction phase until final payment. Once we go through and we select that particular module, this module links P2 projects to RMS contracts that are already created. We can click add and select the correct P2 code and task code to link the RMS contract. So a quick note is it's preferred for the project administrators to link the appropriate P2 code and task code after uploading CFM's finances to RMS3. The project administrator goes to contract funding tab, and for each funding account selects the appropriate P2 code and adds the contract amounts. From there, we can check the task status, the milestone events, and cost time growth data, and those will come over from P2 to RMS3 prior to contract award. And after construction award, this data in RMS will feed to P2. So some of the common errors, P2 project are not displayed in the lookup field. We just need to make sure to check to ensure that the project was set up correctly in P2. And then we can also see the tutorial video. So we do have a tutorial video that is available. I'm going to pull that up right now, but one of the issues that, or several issues that we want to make sure to check is that the dollar amount is greater than 0.001, and then the status of the project needs to be open or active. So let me go ahead and pull that up really quickly just so we can make sure to note that. All right, and here we go. And we're not going to go through this whole video. We're just going to jump really quickly over to the gotcha section right here. All right, so essentially P2 linking, important notes. What we want to keep in mind is that number one, RMS codes need to be associated with the project, like RMS-A contract or RMS-M. We usually refer to those as the RMS-A codes. Those are milestone codes, etc. The status of the project needs to be open, active, and not closed. And then the dollar amount resources assigned to the project needs to be greater than 0.01 cent is the designation to ignore it. So essentially, if you have it set to 1 cent, that's the designation to ignore. So we want to make sure that that's not set up to 1 cent. Greater than 1 cent is what we need to be. And then the, did I check that? Okay. Then the task organization needs to be assigned so we can find it, usually associated with a particular office. So those are the keys that we want to make sure to take a look at when we're setting up our P2 linkings. That's very important. And let me pull this back down here. There we go. All right, so it's very important when we're going through P2 to make sure that those items are in check. In any case, after logging into RMS and selecting the desired contract, we can select the administration tab and then contract status. Yes, so if they're having a particular issue, they can, so basically the question was asked that said, should the user open up a ticket for their projects awaiting P2 linking? Currently right now for the overall linking issue that James is referring to, we already are aware of it, so there's no need for that one. But if they're having some other issue, then most definitely opening up a ticket would be good so that we can go through and run down the process list to make sure that each one of their issues are resolved. All right, once we select contract status, we'll click on phase status issues, and then we'll choose project engineers who should update contract status monthly until the final payment. The data uploads to P2 if linked for upward reporting. So the number one box at the top, we'll see if we click on contract status, data field and select that status code. That reflects the current phase or status of the contract until final payment. If we go over to number 2, the primary delay code for this contract, we can update that each month. Number 3 is the remarks, and that's a short field, is primarily for the PM to enter their information. And then number 4, enter the remarks for the customer to see under the issues customer section. Remarks will be used in P2 reports where customers can view in issues and USAs. That's the item down at the bottom underneath the issues customer. You can update that prior to the monthly PRB, and then you can enter the date and issues remarks as of when updates take place. So the milestone schedule and monthly placement can be found on the schedules tab as well. Another issue that often arises is understanding when the interfaces with P2 and CFMs will actually run. And we have added a module where you can double check that. You'll click on a local office. And then once you click on local office, you will choose the import P2. So let me double check that. Let me pull that up here. It's like we skipped a step. So all right, I got to sift through all my screens to grab the correct information. All right, so let me pull this up. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. All right, so when we go ahead and select local office, that'll bring us to our local office screen, and then we can select this module right here, which is interface schedules, and then that will show us that particular screen, which will list the information. So like right now, you'll see that screen, which is local office, and then it went directly that. So we do select interface schedule, and then that'll take us to that overall screen. And then we basically defer to the local policy. The next area that we looked at already, but we'll bring back again, is the import P2 area, and that just basically lets you know that it's automated. So there's nothing for you to do on that particular screen. All right, and with that, we've reached the end of day 1 of Train the Trainer. We will be available tomorrow for day 2, where we'll go over the final elements of our puzzle. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our management team. Over.
Thank you guys for coming. If there are currently our Train the Trainer presentation from schedule time to schedule time hasn't changed. As we continue to provide our team training and we want to help our users use our software to the best of its capabilities, please don't hesitate to submit topics, ideas, problems. You can contact the help desk, you can contact the PMO. And we do thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.